Bitcoin is boring. I'm going to say that again. Bitcoin is boring until it's not. All right. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. It can feel boring right now. Okay. We've been chopping around 90 to 108. Actually, even some could argue 96 to 102 right now. Boring stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look back at history and see what boring gets us. Okay? Because it's boring until it's not. And then it works at breakneck speeds. Okay, so let's dive in. So boring. We're going to go back to the bottom of the cycle. All right, so we're going to go back to 2023 here, and we're going to take a look. 2022 to early 23. And you can see this was the back end of the bull cycle. So we're in the bear market, and FTX, right? That whole thing caused this downturn. So anyway, the trading range was between $16,000 to $26,000 for 273 days. Boring, right? It's just boring, right? And then we got a bump up here, right? 23% in 21 days. So it's quick, but then guess what? It was boring. We were getting out of the bull market. We weren't fully in a bear. Boring. 224 days at $26,000 to $32,000. Okay. So somebody could actually argue, well, what if we made the trading range from 32 to 16? Well, that's like 597. Actually, you'd go back. It'd be like 600 days. Okay. Almost 2 years of just boring Bitcoin. Now, when we start getting into these bull markets, this is when things get interesting, right? And it's boring until it's not. And look at this. There are triggers that cause these spikes to happen, all right? One of them is the anticipation of spot Bitcoin ETFs. This was in October of 23, and it went up 40%, okay? 40% in 42 days. That's wild. Let's compare that to the stock market, right? S&P 500 just came off the best 2 years, or some of the best 2 years it's ever had. What was it, 23 and 24%? Something like that, right? So what, 46, 47% increase over 2 years, 700 plus days? Guess what? Bitcoin, 42 days, 40%. Close to those returns. Unbelievable, right? This is the thing. It's hard to time the market. So you need to stay in the market through the boring times, because when it runs fast and hard. So we get that bump up, and guess what? Then we're sitting there it consolidates and is boring for 63 days, chopping around at 40 to 45K. This is normal. We have consolidation. We have a breakout. We have a rally. We get a correction. This is all part of the cycle, but here's the thing. When these things run, they run hard and they run fast, okay? The next one, right? We were in anticipation of spot Bitcoin ETFs, sign it up. The actual execution of Bitcoin ETFs being available for institutional buyers and retail buyers who weren't comfortable buying the traditional routes, guess what? It went up 67%, okay? I'm going to zoom in here, 67% in 35 days. That's wild, right? And so when we take a look at these, then there's another consolidation. We got all the way up above the previous all-time high. Before the halving, it's never happened before, right? Then we get a correction, and we traded between 53 and 73 for 238 days. How boring is that? We're just sitting there and waiting. 238 days between this trading range. Boring. Then what happens? Trump gets elected, okay? And this shoots up 48% in 35 days. Unreal, okay? And then guess what happens? Then we consolidate. And right now, it does feel boring. It almost feels bearish. I shouldn't say almost. It does feel bearish. I don't feel that way. But the sentiment in the market kind of feels that way. And right now we're chopping between 90 and 108 for 91 days, and that is boring. But guess what? When this thing breaks out, I expect this thing to break out hard and fast, okay? Because that's what Bitcoin does in these cycles. So let's make some assumptions and let's have a little thought experiment. So if Bitcoin went up based on the anticipation, we're going to compare the anticipation of the Bitcoin ETFs to the Trump election and to the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. I don't know if it's going to happen. I think it might. It's likely. Trump said he wants to do it. I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, it means we might chop around in this consolidation phase for a while. But let's just say that's what the next trigger is. It absolutely could be something else. But let's just say that's the trigger, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. Okay, so the anticipation of the Bitcoin spotted Bitcoin ETF, 40% increase. Okay, that was the anticipation of it. Then when we actually got Bitcoin, it went up 67%. Now let's compare these. The Trump election, Trump didn't even get into office until January 20th. Okay, and so if we look at, here you go, January 20th. Well, guess what? We'd already gotten up to these prices well in advance of that, November, several months in advance. So what I'm saying is the Trump election was anticipation of good things to come, right? A pro-crypto government, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve potentially coming. So let's just say the Trump election was an anticipatory event, okay? Which then means when the actual event occurs, we should expect a larger increase in price. Just like we saw here with the Bitcoin ETF, when it went into effect, all that money flowed in and brought the price up, not just the anticipation. So now, if we had, let's just use some simple math, 48% increase in the anticipation of the Trump election, the anticipatory event, he got elected. And let's compare that to the spot Bitcoin ETF, 40%. So 20% greater. So we could almost argue, and this is too simple, I get that, but we're just having some fun here. If we had a 67% increase when the event actually occurred, what we could be looking at, an 80% increase in price? Maybe. So let's do some conservative things. 40%, right? Let's just use 40% was a most recent, or one of the jumps in price. 40% based off of the current cycle we're in here, around that 108, is 150K. Not too bad. Now let's go somewhere in the middle. We'll still stay conservative. Let's say we go 50%. Okay, we're at 160. Here's where it gets interesting. If we apply, let's say it's 20% greater increase than the actual event of the Bitcoin ETF, because now you've got countries flooding money in, not just institutions, okay? Because the game theory is going to take effect. That puts us at like $195,000 to $200,000. We could chop around and be boring for an extended period of time, and then when whatever trigger we need, maybe it's the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, maybe it's something else. When that happens, we could be at $150,000 to $200,000, like that. Bitcoin is boring. Here's the moral of the story. Get in. And right now, if you get in, let's just go with the 50% between here. Anything below 100K is probably a good buy, right? Between 90 and 100 is probably a good buy. It could go down further. I get that. But right now, there you go. Get in. Be patient. Let it be boring. Because when this thing runs, it's going to be 150, 200K. So, keep stacking the sats. Like and subscribe below. Be bored, because you're going to be bored for a while. And when this thing runs, it's at breakneck speeds, and it's going to get real interesting here coming up. Let me know your thoughts. Like and subscribe. Stack those sats. Thank you.